Welcome to With a Deep Dive. We're here to give you that shortcut to being genuinely well-informed, cutting through all the noise. Today, we're plunging into a whole stack of sources, looking at everything from really groundbreaking science and space developments to the tangled web of global politics, economic shifts, and some pretty compelling human stories, too. Our mission, like always, is to connect those dots for you, find the aha moments, and give you the context that actually makes this stuff stick.
Exactly. This isn't just reading headlines aloud. It's about getting under the surface, understanding the bigger picture. We want to help you synthesize all this information coming at you, see the different angles, and hopefully leave you with a richer grasp of what's happening in our world.
All right, let's dive in. We're kicking things off with news that honestly feels like it's straight out of science fiction, but is very, very real. We're talking about progress towards limitless clean energy.
Indeed. We're looking at Germany's Wendelstein 7X Stellarator. Now, this is the world's largest fusion device of its kind, and it's just smashed its own records, achieving some really remarkable new fusion performance milestones.
And it's not just any record, is it? They've actually hit a world record in a key fusion physics parameter, the triple product, they call it. For those of us, like me, not building particle accelerators in the garage, that sounds like a pretty big deal, especially since it surpasses records from tokamaks, right?
Right.
Which has sort of been the main design people focused on.
That's exactly right. It's huge. It shows this Stellarator design with its, more complex, twisted magnetic field is really coming into its own. And crucially, they're also making big steps in maintaining the plasma for longer durations. Keeping it stable, that's absolutely essential for sustained fusion power. Getting it started is one thing, keeping it going safely is the real prize.
Okay, so what are the wider implications here, beyond just the cool science?
Well, what's truly fascinating isn't just the tech achievement, amazing as it is. It's the profound implications for society. This kind of progress doesn't just promise energy, it could reshape, energy security globally. Imagine a future less dependent on volatile fossil fuels, where energy is maybe a source of stability, not conflict. And this was a big collaboration, too, Europe and the U.S. working together. It's kind of a model for tackling these huge global challenges. It opens up possibilities we barely even imagine right now.
Right. From the power within the atom, let's zoom way out to the mysteries of the cosmos. Our next stop is this absolutely breathtaking picture from the NASA, that's the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and ESA, the European Space Agency Hubble Space Telescope.
Yes, this image shows a galaxy cluster called Able 209. It's incredibly far away, about 2.8 billion light years, located in the constellation Cetus. And you see over 100 galaxies in the picture. But the really mind-bending part is the space between them. It's not empty, it's filled with invisible dark matter, and also this incredibly hot diffuse gas that you can only really detect with X-ray telescopes.
Invisible dark matter, it always gets me. How on earth do astronomers study something they literally can't see? Is it just really clever guesswork?
Well, it's a bit more than guesswork. They use effects like gravitational lensing. Think of a massive cluster like Able 209 as a giant lens in space. Its gravity is so strong, it actually bends the light from galaxies located behind it from our perspective, distorting their appearance. Now, this specific Hubble image doesn't show those really dramatic Einstein rings you sometimes see, but even subtle distortions in the shapes of the galaxies within the cluster give clues. It lets astronomers map out where the gravity is strongest and therefore where the unseen dark matter must be. The goal is to map this mass distribution very precisely to understand how the universe evolved. You see the effects of the unseen on the scene.
Okay, that makes a bit more sense. Seeing the invisible through its effects. Cool. So here's where it gets, really interesting, I think. Moving from the cosmic scale to the practical, sometimes messy side of space exploration. The ambition of reaching for the stars meets the gritty reality of engineering and just plain human effort. We've got news from SpaceX's Starbase facility down in South Texas.
Yes, Starbase, which is, of course, famous for the Starship development and the Mars mission ambitions, has unfortunately reported higher injury rates compared to some of its competitors. It really highlights the intense pressure involved in this kind of work, the challenging nature of it, and the inherent risks when you're pushing boundaries that fast. There's often a steep learning curve with rapid innovation, and sometimes safety protocols struggle to keep pace with the engineering drive.
Yeah, sounds like they're really on the edge, sometimes maybe too close. But on the flip side, NASA's also pushing boundaries, but more on the enabling technology side for long trips.
Exactly. NASA is developing and testing a really innovative technique for storing super cold fuel for long periods. This is a huge hurdle for missions to the moon or Mars. You've got propellants like liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, which are extremely cold and want to, well, boil off into space over time. Their solution uses advanced cryogenic fluid management, basically, a fancy term for keeping things incredibly cold. They use 2 stages of active cooling with cryocoolers to stop the propellant from escaping. This is absolutely vital for those journeys that could take months or even years. Otherwise, your spacecraft runs out of gas halfway there. This work is led by NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center and Glenn Research Center.
Wow. Keeping fuel that cold for that long in space is like trying to keep an ice cube frozen next to a bonfire. Just incredible engineering. And NASA also has this Athena EPIC mission. What's that about? EPIC stands for Economic Payload Integration Cost, right?
That's right. This mission is all about testing a new, scalable space vehicle design. The key idea is to manage resources, power, data, cooling really efficiently among different payloads, different instruments on board. The goal is to bring down costs significantly for taxpayers and also speed up launch preparations, making space more accessible, basically. It's a collaborative effort, too, with partners like NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the U.S. Space Force. They're using something called hyper-integrated satellite technology. Think of satellites as like modular building blocks for satellites, Lego in space, almost. It allows for much more flexible designs, easier upgrades, which cuts costs and timelines, especially for smaller, focused missions.
Lego in space. I like that. And speaking of accessibility and frequent launches, SpaceX is certainly keeping busy. They just sent up another batch of Starlink satellites, didn't they? Falcon 9 rocket, 24 satellites heading to the polar orbit from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. It really does feel like a new era. We went from maybe one big launch every few months to, oh, look, another rocket's going up today.
It's a remarkable pace, truly changing the economics and accessibility of space.
Okay, so from the frontiers of science and space, let's pivot now to the often messy frontier of geopolitics. We're seeing new sanctions against Russia, making some pretty big waves around the world, affecting economies and relationships.
Yes, the European Union, the EU, has just put its 18th round of sanctions on Russia. These are specifically targeting key areas like the energy and banking sectors. They're being described as unprecedented, some of the toughest in years. And we're already seeing effects. Oil prices have ticked up, and the EU has put a lower price cap on Russian crude oil. And the reach is quite wide. Reports suggest these sanctions are even affecting India's Nayara Energy Company, possibly putting a planned sale at risk because of its links to Russian oil.
But there's always the other side of the story, isn't there?
Yeah.
Russia's saying these sanctions hurt the EU more than them.
That's the counter-narrative, yes. Kirill Dmitriev, who's a Russian presidential investment envoy, stated exactly that the sanctions are more damaging to EU member states than to Moscow.
Huh.
He points to Russia's GDP growth, which is surprising to many, despite facing, apparently, over 30,000 different sanctions. He claims Russia has built up immunity. It's a battle of economic narratives, really.
30,000 sanctions. Wow.
It's an astonishing number, and if you connect this to the bigger picture, it just underscores this really complex dance between economic pressure from one side and national resilience or adaptation on the other. The EU wants to limit Russia's resources, while Moscow wants to project strength and self-reliance, finding new partners. And it shows how countries like India get caught in the middle, trying to balance their own economic needs with these global political pressures. Oh, and separately, it's worth noting the UK, the United Kingdom, also put its own sanctions on 3 Russian intelligence units and 18 officers for malicious activities. So tensions are escalating beyond just the economy.
Right. Now, shifting gears slightly, but staying in international relations, there was this recent prisoner swap between the U.S. and Venezuela. Sounds quite cloak and dagger.
It often is. Venezuela released 10 Americans. In exchange, the U.S. arranged for Venezuelan migrants who had been deported to El Salvador to effectively be part of the deal. It was brokered through complex international negotiations, the kind of quiet diplomacy that happens behind closed doors. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed the release and, interestingly, gave credit to former President Donald Trump's leadership on the issue. El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele also commented, welcoming the exchange and focusing on the freedom of the Venezuelan deportees. It's a complex situation. It shows how sometimes things like deportation policy, usually seen as an immigration issue, can become tangled up with foreign policy goals. A controversial tactic, for sure.
Speaking of former President Trump, he seems to be keeping very busy on the domestic front, too. Lots of legal action, policy moves. His influence definitely still shapes things.
That's putting it mildly. Former President Trump has filed libel lawsuits against Rupert Murdoch and his media companies, The Wall Street Journal, News Corp, Dow Jones. This is over a report alleging Trump sent a, quote, lewd letter to Jeffrey Epstein back in 2003 for his birthday. Trump seeking a huge sum, $10 billion in damages, and strongly denies writing any such picture, as he put it. This comes after another lawsuit against journalist Bob Woodward over audiobook tapes from his book Rage was dismissed by a federal judge. So lots of legal battles ongoing about his public image and past associations.
And the Epstein case itself keeps bubbling up, doesn't it? The Department of Justice is involved now, too.
Yes, the DOJ Department of Justice is moving to release grand jury testimony related to the Epstein investigation. This was actually something the Trump administration had requested earlier. Pam Bondi, who was Attorney General at the time, called it a matter of public concern, reflecting that ongoing public interest in getting more transparency on the case.
And then there's this whole other track, declassified evidence emerging, suggesting a conspiracy during the Obama administration.
Right. Allegations are surfacing based on declassified documents that the Obama administration tried to undermine Trump's 2016 win in presidency. The claim is they manipulated intelligence to push the idea of Russian election interference. Tulsi Gabbard, the former Democratic congresswoman, has even called for prosecuting former President Obama over it, calling it a treasonous conspiracy. It really throws fuel on the fire of partisan division and brings scrutiny back onto past administrations' actions, especially around intelligence and elections.
Wow. Okay, shifting to legislation, President Trump also signed a major cryptocurrency bill, the Genius Act. That seems interesting, given crypto's volatility.
It is interesting. The stated goal is quite ambitious, to make the U.S. the crypto capital of the planet. Apparently, the bill passed after some internal disagreement, a right-wing rebellion in the House, suggesting even within the Republican Party there isn't full consensus. But critics argue it doesn't go far enough, especially on regulating stablecoins, those cryptocurrencies pegged to traditional money. They think that needs a whole different approach. It's a tricky area to regulate effectively.
And sticking with controversial policy, there's movement on gun ownership rules, initiated by Attorney General Pam Bondi.
Yes, aligning with promises made by President Trump during his campaign to gun rights advocates. The process aims to make it potentially easier for some individuals with certain past criminal convictions to regain the right to own firearms. It involves shifting some authority from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, to the Attorney General's office to grant exemptions. Now, it's important to stress the proposal states that violent felons, registered sex offenders, and undocumented immigrants would likely still be barred. But gun control groups like Brady are strongly opposing it, raising major public safety concerns. It's definitely going to be a fiercely debated topic.
Okay, and there was also something about marble. In federal building. That sounds oddly specific.
Yes, it does. There's ongoing scrutiny, now apparently involving the White House, over decisions made by Trump appointees regarding the use of, well, a lot of marble in a federal building renovation. It seems minor, but it's being framed as highlighting power dynamics and potential clashes between the White House, Trump's lingering influence, and even the Federal Reserve over spending and priorities.
So, looking at all this, what's the takeaway? It feels like a whirlwind of intense political maneuvering. Domestic issues, personal legal fights, they all seem to ripple outwards, nationally, even globally.
That's a good way to put it. Everything seems interconnected. And speaking of international ripples from domestic situations, let's look at Brazil.
Right. Former President Jair Bolsonaro is facing restrictions.
Yes, a Brazilian court has ordered him to wear an ankle monitor. He's also barred from using social media and is under 24-hour surveillance. Pretty significant constraints reflecting the legal challenges he's facing back home.
And the U.S. has waded into this.
It has. The U.S. State Department, under Secretary Marco Rubio, announced travel visa restrictions for certain Brazilian judicial officials and their families. Rubio called the situation in Brazil a political witch hunt against Bolsonaro, specifically criticizing Justice Alexandre de Moraes, accusing him of creating a persecution and censorship complex. However, Brazil's current president, Lula da Silva, fired back, calling the U.S. sanctions interference in Brazil's internal affairs. It's a tricky diplomatic situation, showing how domestic legal issues can quickly become international disputes.
Definitely tricky. Okay, zooming out again to the major global powers, there's talk of a potential big meeting. Trump, Putin.
There's been reporting, notably from the Times, suggesting a possibility that former President Trump might meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping. The potential venue is Beijing this September, timed for the 80th anniversary of the victory over Imperial Japan. China is apparently planning a military parade for it. Now, the Kremlin officially says it's unaware of specific plans for a trilateral summit, but they did confirm Putin accepted Xi's invitation to the anniversary event itself. If those three leaders were actually to sit down together, well, that would be a hugely significant geopolitical moment, no question.
Absolutely. And President Trump has also been vocal about the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. He issued a warning.
Yes, he threatened them with 10% tariffs if they challenged the dominance of the U.S. dollar, even claiming his warning disrupted one of their summits. It's very direct economic signaling. But Russia's finance minister responded by highlighting that BRICS countries are increasingly using their own national currencies for trade among themselves, precisely to reduce reliance on the dollar. Russian officials also pushed back, saying BRICS isn't trying to rival the dollar, but rather foster cooperation and move towards a more, multipolar global financial system. It's a clear point of friction over currency power.
Okay, let's quickly touch on some other key geopolitical hotspots around the globe. Starting in Africa, some positive news from the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC.
Yes, a significant step. The DRC government and the M23 rebel group have signed a declaration of principles in Qatar. The aim is to end the long-running conflict in eastern Congo. This conflict has deep roots going back to the aftermath of the 1994 Rwandan genocide and has caused immense suffering, deaths, and displacement. So any agreement, even on principles, is a hopeful sign for the region.
And a ceasefire announced in Syria as well.
Yes, the Syrian presidency announced a ceasefire after some really deadly sectarian clashes between Bedouin and Druze groups in the Suwida region, which reportedly killed hundreds. Interestingly, the U.S. has claimed some credit for supporting an Israel-Syria ceasefire aimed at fostering a, quote, new united Syrian identity. But, achieving lasting peace there remains incredibly challenging.
And the war in Ukraine continues, unfortunately. What are the latest developments?
Well, on the military side, Russian air defenses say they've intercepted a lot of Ukrainian drones targeting Moscow, showing that aerial dimension of the war continues intensely. There are also reports suggesting that the U.S.-supplied Patriot air defense systems are, perhaps, struggling against some of Russia's more advanced ballistic missiles. That's an ongoing technological battle. Russia, in turn, says it conducted strikes targeting Ukrainian facilities making drone and missile parts. And the human cost remains stark. Residents in Kyiv are reportedly sleeping in subway stations because of the constant threat of air raids, just a devastating reality for civilians. Diplomatically, President Zelensky of Ukraine has put forward a 10-point peace plan and offered new talks. But Russia maintains that Ukraine is just looking for a pause to rearm, so not much movement towards a settlement, it seems.
Such a grim situation. And another difficult story related to conflict aftermath, a data breach affecting Afghan allies of the UK.
Yes, this is quite serious. The UK Ministry of Defense says it will strongly fight compensation claims from thousands of Afghans whose personal details were exposed in a data breach. These are people who worked with British forces during the war in Afghanistan, and the breach put them in grave danger. Reports suggest it was covered up for years and then resurfaced on Facebook. Big questions about data security and responsibility there.
Moving to Europe, France is grappling with budget issues and a controversial idea.
The French Prime Minister floated the idea of reducing the number of statutory public holidays to help balance the budget. This has sparked widespread outrage. It's widely seen as an attack on French culture and workers' rights, especially as it seems aimed at protecting the defense budget from cuts. Lots of opposition.
And tensions between Georgia and the European Union.
Yes, Georgia's parliament speaker, Shalva Paposhvili, made some strong accusations claiming the EU is meddling in Georgia's elections, even comparing it to Soviet tactics. The EU, for its part, has warned Georgia that its path towards EU integration could be halted if it doesn't uphold democratic standards. It shows the geopolitical sensitivity around EU expansion and influence in that region.
And from the Middle East, the situation in Gaza remains dire.
Tragically, yes. The Hamas-run health ministry reported dozens killed by Israeli gunfire near aid distribution points in southern Gaza, with over 100 injured. An opinion piece in Al Jazeera described the situation as heartbreaking, with families facing starvation, framed as a potential war strategy by Israel. The humanitarian crisis is incredibly severe, with growing international pressure.
And finally, Haiti continues to face a severe crisis due to gang violence.
It's desperate. Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, actually visited Haiti recently, offering support. He opened an embassy there and pledged security assistance. This comes as hundreds of thousands of people are displaced, many sheltering in schools, literally using desks as beds. It highlights the extreme humanitarian emergency and the urgent need for stability and international help.
Okay, let's shift our focus now to the environment, society, and how these big issues impact daily life, starting with a really concerning situation in Honduras.
Yeah, this is quite striking. Honduras is facing nearly $20 billion in claims through something called the Investor State Dispute Settlement, or ISDS, system. These claims are from international corporations suing the government over local regulations designed to protect public health and the environment. $20 billion. That's more than 5 times Honduras's annual public spending. What's really interesting and problematic is how ISDS works. It allows corporations to sue governments in international tribunals, often behind closed doors, if they feel new regulations hurt their profits. Critics argue it creates a regulatory chill where governments become afraid to pass environmental or health laws because they fear these incredibly expensive lawsuits. Even the Inter-American Court of Human Rights has noted the threat ISDS poses.
Wow, $20 billion. It's like being sued for trying to keep your own house safe. That's staggering. And speaking of environmental challenges and preparedness, there are concerns about budget cuts in the U.S. affecting disaster response.
Yes, particularly looking at the impact of budget and staffing cuts during the Trump administration on agencies like FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. For example, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, known as BRIC, which was specifically designed to help communities prepare before disaster strike, was terminated. Cuts like these can weaken the ability to accurately forecast weather, conduct climate research, and respond effectively when disasters happen, which of course are becoming more frequent and intense due to climate change.
And climate change just makes everything worse, doesn't it? We hear terms like ENSO, that's the El Nino Southern Oscillation, the big Pacific weather pattern, and albedo, which is about how much sunlight Earth reflects. Understanding these is key to grasping the bigger climate picture. But speaking of more immediate weather, there's a warning out for the UK right now.
Yes, an amber weather warning is in effect for thunderstorms. They're expected to bring flash flooding to London and the southeast of England. Meteorologists are forecasting really intense rainfall, potentially 20 to 40 millimeters in just an hour. Much of the UK is under similar alerts, so people need to be cautious.
Definitely. Okay, moving to population and public health news. We actually have some good news for a change from the River Thames in London.
That's right. The annual Royal Swan Count on the Thames found a positive increase in swan numbers this year. This comes after a period of decline, so it suggests conservation efforts are working. A nice bit of positive environmental news.
Always good to hear about conservation successes. And some interesting research about women and anger as they age.
Yes, new research suggests that women might actually feel more anger as they get older, but they tend to express it less outwardly. It points to a possible shift in how anger is managed over a lifetime, maybe influenced by societal expectations or internal coping mechanisms. It's quite fascinating.
Interesting. On a much more somber note, though, there's tragic news regarding malaria in Zimbabwe.
Yes, reports indicate that malaria deaths in Zimbabwe have tragically tripled. This signals a really severe public health crisis escalating rapidly in the region, requiring urgent attention and resources. A stark reminder of ongoing global health challenges.
And a compassionate move from the UK City Council.
Manchester City Council has become the first local authority in the UK to exempt terminally ill residents from paying council tax. It's a move aimed at easing the financial burden on very vulnerable people and their families during an incredibly difficult time, a policy driven by empathy.
That's good to see. Now, there's been some stuff going around social media about sunscreen causing cancer.
Yeah, it's crucial to address this. Experts completely refute these claims. There's absolutely no scientific basis for the idea that sunscreen causes cancer. In fact, it's the opposite. Sunscreen is vital for protecting your skin from harmful UV radiation, which does cause skin cancer. Always rely on scientific sources for health info, not viral rumors.
Good clarification.
Yeah.
Also in public health, Northern Ireland is expanding its RSV vaccination program. RSV is respiratory syncytial virus, right?
Correct. They're extending the vaccination program to include premature babies. This is really important because RSV can be very dangerous for infants, especially preemies with underdeveloped lungs. It's a key protective measure.
And a very unusual and ethically complex legal case from the U.S. involving a death row inmate.
Yes. In Tennessee, a judge ordered the deactivation of an inmate's implanted heart-regulating device, like a pacemaker or defibrillator. The reason was to prevent the device from potentially shocking him during his execution by lethal injection. It sparked a lot of debate about capital punishment, medical ethics, and what constitutes cruel and unusual punishment under the Eighth Amendment.
Heavy stuff. Finally, on the demographic front, concerns in Italy about birth rates.
Yes, the Italian government is grappling with a continuing decline in birth rates, a trend seen in many developed countries. There are calls for more support for families and incentives to have children, reflecting wider concerns about aging populations and shrinking workforces across much of Europe and beyond.
Okay, now we need to turn to a difficult but important section: accidents and crime, starting with a truly heartbreaking coach crash in the UK.
Yes, just devastating news from Exmoor in the UK. A coach carrying pupils from Minehead Middle School crashed. Tragically, a 10-year-old boy died and 9 other children were hospitalized. The community has rallied, raising over £20,000 for the victims and their families. Just an awful reminder of the fragility of life.
Absolutely terrible. And a deadly explosion at a police facility in California.
Also tragic, an explosion at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department training facility in East Los Angeles killed 3 deputies. The department described it as their largest loss of life in a single incident since 1857. The cause is under intense investigation, a huge blow to the department and the community.
And another transport disaster, this time a boat capsized in Vietnam.
Yes, a tourist boat capsized in Ha Long Bay, Vietnam, apparently during bad weather. At least 34 people died, and 14 were reported missing. Heartbreakingly, most victims were families, including more than 20 children. It really underscores the need for stringent safety standards in tourism, especially in areas known for unpredictable weather.
Just awful. And a building collapse in South Africa that sounds like it should never have happened.
That's what the investigation suggests. A building collapse killed 34 construction workers. The minister overseeing the probe called it entirely preventable. Apparently, workers had reported feeling vibrations beforehand, but were allegedly told to just cover up cracks with sand. It points to potentially criminal negligence and failures in safety oversight.
Turning to crime, there's a reported rise in dog attacks in England and Wales, and a very sad shooting in London.
Yes, there are growing concerns about dog attacks. And in London, a 15-year-old boy, Renee Graham, was fatally shot at a festival event in Ladbroke Grove. A suspect was reportedly filmed holding a gun during a street chase related to the incident. It highlights ongoing worries about youth violence and gun crime in urban areas.
And we also have a couple of quite striking drug-related cases from the UK.
Indeed. One involves a woman from Bradford, Farzana Kauser, jailed for importing a large amount, 180 kilograms of cocaine. Shockingly, she admitted using children in the smuggling operation. Truly appalling exploitation. And then there's the story of Gangsta Debs, a 65-year-old woman who apparently used her family members to run a massive 80 million drug empire. The age and scale certainly made headlines.
Gangsta Debs. Wow. And finally, a state senator in the U.S. convicted of burglary.
Yes, Minnesota State Senator Nicole Mitchell was convicted on 2 counts of burglary for breaking into her estranged stepmother's house. Beyond the personal legal trouble, this conviction creates political uncertainty, potentially affecting the Democrats' narrow majority in the state Senate there.
Okay, after all that heavy news, let's shift gears for a look at sports and entertainment. Some lighter fare, hopefully. Starting with golf, updates from the Open Championship.
Definitely some excitement there. Scottie Scheffler shot a career-low round in a major to take the lead, which is incredible playing. Rory McIlroy is also making a push. He had 3 quick birdies. And Tyrrell Hatton holed out for eagle from 140 yards. So yeah, lots of action keeping fans glued to the scores.
Sounds thrilling. And a big heavyweight boxing match is coming up.
Yes, huge fight. Ukrainian champion Alexander Usyk is set to defend his titles against London's own Daniel Dubois at Wembley Stadium. Usyk holds multiple belts. He's undefeated. Should be a massive night for boxing fans.
On the football pitch or soccer, for some listeners, Spain's through to the Euro semis, and any big transfer news.
Well, Spain's progress is notable. And the big rumor, or rather developing story, is Barcelona opening talks to potentially sign Marcus Rashford from Manchester United. That would be a massive transfer if it happens. Also, England fans will be relieved. They're optimistic that Captain Leo Williamson will be fit for their Euro 2025 semi-final match.
Good news for England. In the WNBA, Sabrina Ionescu continues to impress, right?
Absolutely. She just won her second three-point contest title. She's an amazing shooter for the New York Liberty. On the downside, star rookie Caitlin Clark from the Indiana Fever had to pull out of the contest due to injury. And there's some off-court news, too. WNBA players have expressed disappointment over recent collective bargaining agreement talks, calling them wasted. So some labor tensions there.
Okay, baseball highlights. A streak snapped and an amazing throw.
Yeah, Seiya Suzuki of the Chicago Cubs hit a big 3-run homer that ended the Boston Red Sox's long 10-game winning streak, and Ronald Acuna Jr. made an absolutely jaw-dropping double play throw from the outfield. People are comparing it to the legendary Roberto Clemente. That's about the highest praise you can get for a defensive play like that.
High praise indeed. What about rugby?
The British and Irish Lions got off to a winning start in their test series against Australia. Beating them in the first match to take the lead sets up an exciting rest of the series.
And finally, for sports, London's aiming to host another major event.
Yes, the UK government has officially backed London's bid to host the 2029 World Athletics Championships. Bringing that event back to the Olympic Stadium would be fantastic for the city.
Okay, let's check the entertainment beat. A MasterChef crisis. Sounds dramatic.
Well, maybe a bit overblown, but reports claim the hosts, Greg Wallace and John Turode, were never friends. And apparently there have been 9 complaints made against Turode. Suggests some friction behind the scenes of that popular cooking show.
Interesting. And bigger news in the TV world. Stephen Colbert's The Late Show is being canceled.
Yes, CBS canceled The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. This has really fueled discussion about the future of the whole late-night talk show format in the U.S., asking if the genre is dying out as viewing habits change. It's telling that both former President Trump and Rosie O'Donnell commented on the cancellation. It shows how intertwined late-night TV, politics, and culture have become. Colbert's relationship with Trump, for instance, was often seen as a key part of the show's identity. This cancellation feels like a significant shift.
Definitely a sign of changing times. And an awkward kiss cam moment led to his CEO resigning.
Yeah, pretty awkward. Andy Byron, the CEO of a U.S. tech company called Astronomer, resigned after a video of him embracing his head of HR, Kristen Cabot, at a Coldplay concert went viral. It was captured on the stadium's kiss cam. It highlights the sometimes awkward history of those kiss cams and just how quickly a private moment can become very public and have serious professional consequences in the digital age.
Oof. Okay, music news. Tyler, the creator.
He's teasing a new album. It's apparently titled Don't Tap the Glass. Great news for his fans, always exciting to see what he comes up with next.
And a film that's successful globally but facing issues in India.
Yes, the Punjabi star Diljit Dosanjh has a new film, Sardar G3, which is doing well internationally, but it's reportedly been blocked from release in India because one of his co-stars is Pakistani. It really raises questions about artistic freedom versus political tensions and how geopolitics can unfortunately impact cultural exchange and entertainment.
Yeah, that's a shame. And finally, a big event happening in Scotland.
The Tall Ships event is underway in Aberdeen. It's apparently transformed the city into a huge party city, expected to draw hundreds of thousands of visitors. A great spectacle and a big boost for tourism there.
Wow, okay. What a journey we've been on today. From, the tiniest particles aiming for fusion power out to these vast galaxies holding secrets like dark matter, and then all the way back down to Earth, covering deeply personal stories, tragic accidents, and those huge, complex geopolitical shifts. It really shows how interconnected everything is.
It really does. And I think the key takeaway from all these different stories is exactly that interconnectedness. Things that seem separate, space tech breakthroughs, political sanctions, social trends, even sad local news, they're all threads in this incredibly complex global web. It just highlights how important critical thinking is, in this flood of information we all face. Which kind of brings up the big question, doesn't it? How do we, as informed people trying to understand the world, how do we actually synthesize all this? How do we see the deeper meaning and not just get overwhelmed by the sheer volume of news? How do we find the signal in all the noise?
That really is the challenge, isn't it? So as you, our listener, reflect on everything we've covered in this deep dive, what stands out most to you? What new questions pop into your head? Think about it. We see these amazing scientific leaps happening alongside really profound human challenges and tragedies. How might an innovation in one area, say fusion energy or space exploration, unexpectedly ripple out and affect something totally different like global power balances or how we allocate resources here on Earth? Every single piece of news, no matter how small it seems or how far away it happened, it's all contributing to this constantly evolving story of our world. It's shaping our future in ways we're probably only just starting to figure out.